Hello, good afternoon. Thank you everyone for joining us today. We really appreciate you engaging with the consultation. We know it's a difficult and interesting time, and of course we'd hoped to be with you in the Filmhouse building on Lothian Road in person, showing you the 3D model and talking through your questions and ideas and concerns about the project. So thank you for joining us in this online forum instead. Hopefully you should have the same opportunities. We've got 3 panelists who will talk from their different perspectives on the project, and we have a live Q&A function, which you'll be able to, hopefully you can see it at the bottom of your screen. And if you type in your questions there, rather, we will come to each of them in turn and do what we can to answer them for you. I hope you've had a chance to look at the information that's on the Filmhouse website. There's a lot there, videos, text and images and plans of the new building that we're proposing. Hopefully you've had a chance to look at that and it's given you some idea of what we'll talk about this afternoon. We're streaming live onto YouTube at the moment, and we're also recording the session so that it will be available later online. If you need to go and collect a delivery or finish the homeschooling or grab a cup of tea, you won't miss out on things. You can come back to it and have a look. This afternoon, we've got Louisa McDade with us, who's live captioning the event. So a big thank you to her. You can find the information and the access to the captions on the chat function, again, at the bottom of your screen, and also on the YouTube stream underneath the video. You'll see the link and also instructions of how to go about making those captions live. We're going to ask you 1 or 2 questions as we go through this. That will give us a good sense of who's joined us this afternoon, what you already know about Filmhouse and the project. So to do that, we're going to use these polls. They'll come up one at a time and we'll ask you a question sprinkled throughout. So I'm going to launch the first one at the moment. And if you could click on the answer most appropriate. So how often do you attend Filmhouse? Is it more than once a month? Once a month, every 6 months, once a year, every 2 years, or have you never seen a film at the Filmhouse? So place your votes now, and I'll finish that when we've got them all in. We're nearly there. Great, okay. I'm going to end that poll and share the results with you all. So you can see that 22% come more than once a month, which is fantastic, and another 60% once a month, 67% once a month. So really regular attenders. No one's never seen a film at the Filmhouse, so that's good news. Great, so we'll do 1 or 2 more of those as we go through this hour-long session. We've got 3 panelists here, each ready to lay out their thinking on the proposed new building. We've got Ken Hay, who's the Chief Executive of Centre for the Moving Image, which incorporates Edinburgh International Film Festival, Edinburgh Filmhouse and the Belmont Aberdeen. Can you hear my seagulls? Sorry, I'm in Leith, can you tell? We've also got Richard Murphy, the award-winning architect whose plans for the new building you've hopefully had a chance to look at on the website. And we have Fraser Littlejohn, a planning partner at Montague Evans, who are the property consultants on this capital project. Their short presentations will take around 15 minutes in total, and then we've got lots of time to take your questions. So as I say, we've allowed an hour. We've had 1 or 2 questions in advance, but there's a good amount of time to take them live, so please do fill that in. Okay, I think probably now it's time to head over to you, Ken.
Thank you very much, Susie. I'm just going to get an image up on screen. And I'll talk you through 3 or 4 slides in a second. And here you can see in front of you the proposal. I think the thing to say, first of all, is it is a work in progress. The reason we've got having a consultation period is to get your feedback on what you think about what we were proposing to do. So that's why, although it's a very strange environment to be having it done through Zoom, it's absolutely critically important to us to get your thoughts and questions about the proposed new building. Before I start, though, I think the first thing to do is answer the favourite question, not just of these sessions, but over the last few years, is why do you need a new building? Why can't you just sort out the existing one? The existing one is actually 4 separate buildings. It's an old Georgian church. It's 190 years old. And we've been inhabiting it since the late 1970s. And I think it's fair to say that we've created a really special space in that time. It's a space that people love. I've been going there myself since the 1980s, and I've had the privilege and honour of running it since 2011. But the hard fact is it's completely inadequate for what we have been doing over many years, what we're trying to do now, and what we have the ambition to do in the future. To put that into context, we host more than 20 other film festivals each year, as well as Edinburgh International Film Festival. We welcome over the door 200,000 people each year to see films and 300,000 people coming to the cafe bar. We attract 10,000 school kids in for school screenings and education events. All of that is fantastic, but the fact it's able to happen in a completely inadequate building is testament both to you as the customers and to the organisation I have the privilege of running. But it doesn't work, and it's working less and less well. We've looked at how we could refurbish the existing Filmhouse, and all that would happen is we have less space rather than more. We would go from approximately 280 seats in Cinema 1 down to about 160 if we re-raked the cinema and made it more comfortable, got the sight lines better, wider seats, more legroom. If we made the toilets big enough and had enough of them, which again, everyone wants us to do, the only way we can do that on a constrained footprint is to eat into the public spaces. In other words, eating into the cinema space or eating into the cafe bar space. And that doesn't deal with the fact that we're just very busy and bursting at the seams, and we want to do more of what we do. So we've looked at how we could refurbish the existing building. It was very expensive, and it delivers a lot less than we currently have. So what we're proposing here is a building that is way more than just being fit for purpose. Of course, that's one of the key things. But what it does is create this statement that film as an art form is really important in its own right. It currently doesn't have a temple to itself, either in Edinburgh or in Scotland, or indeed in the whole of the UK. There are a number of buildings that do different aspects of that, but none of them are the standalone purpose-built temple to film, celebration of film. And that's what we're trying to achieve here. Why? Because we believe film is really important. Our vision is to transform people's lives through film, whether through watching films, making films, or learning about and understanding film. But we need a building that is suitable to do that. Second question I get asked is, but Filmhouse is so special, not just because of the Filmhouse building, but because of what you do and how you do it. And I think the thing to emphasize at the very beginning is we're not planning on changing that ethos or the values that we operate. They're built into the DNA of the organization. That bit about independence, independence of spirit, independence of programming, independence of identity, and how the different screens will look and how we try and get our message across. And with everything being done through with that huge dose of integrity. So those are the underpinning values and ethos that wherever we are, that will underpin who we are. So if I can then just talk you through 4 design principles. These are design principles we gave to Richard and his team along with the actual brief in terms of these are the different spaces we need, but these are the things that underpin that. First of all, clearly we need a space that works for us, but also by us, I mean the broader Filmhouse and Film Festival family. And that includes those smaller film festivals, Take One Action, Scotland Loves Anime, the French Film Festival, Africa in Motion, and so on. How do we provide a space that works for them and works for us? And crucially, that we're able to do in a sustainable way. The current building is completely prohibitive of us actually making enough money to operate. It gets more and more expensive, and we have less ability to generate the cash. This building will allow us to operate sustainably. Secondly, we believe passionately in inclusion and making sure that we are fully accessible. And there are 2 things I want to highlight here. The existing building is very borderline in terms of access. Yes, we can technically get folk through the building if you've got mobility issues, but it's really, really hard work. And if you're a wheelchair user getting into Cinema 2, for example, which theoretically is on the ground floor, you have to come up a ramp at the front of the building, along a corridor, down a platform lift, along a corridor, up a platform lift into the single wheelchair space. It's unacceptable for you, and it's unacceptable for us. That's all we can do. So the physical access within the building is crucially important, and that's what we have built in at the base design. So every level, whether you're a member of staff or a customer, you can get through the building. But the second bit is it's emotionally accessible. Filmhouse, once you get past the threshold, is really welcoming, but you've got the most austere Georgian church facade that stops people knowing it's even a cinema. We're not allowed to put signs up saying it's a cinema. We've got very polite little signs. And so what we're proposing to do here is have that statement going, come in, lots of glass, this is what's going on, we want you to come in, and there's no reason that you can't come in. Thirdly, climate emergency, taken a bit of a back seat in recent months because of coronavirus, but in terms of the core and key issue for the planet over the next few decades, how we address that is key. And we, as a relatively small independent charity, going, what can we do? Well, we can do our bit. And so as designing this, we want to ensure that the building is as close to carbon neutral as it can be. So photovoltaic cells on the glazed areas, air sourced heat pumps to circulate the air around the building, taking it from the outside, and that will be no carbon or fossil fuels, being used. So it'll be entirely electricity driven, with the electricity sourced from verifiably renewable energy sources. And then lastly, we're aware that we're taking up a valuable bit of public space. There's very little public space left in the city centre of Edinburgh. Festival Square is one of them, but it's a really underutilised and underused and underloved bit of the city centre. And what we're aiming to do is clearly having a statement building of this sort. It will generate its own activity, but we're also wanting to use it as a catalyst that sets it in context with the broader cultural quarter, the Usher Hall, the Lyceum and the Traverse, but it also allows us to animate the square. Yes, for teas and coffees, but also just creating space for people to sit out, but also creating space for artists and performers can ply their trade in a really interesting way. Really keen to hear what you have to say in terms of questions. Just reiterating Susie's point, make sure you drop the questions into the Q&A box, and I'll speak to you later. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Ken. Now, just before we go over to Richard, I've got another quick poll for us to do. So this one's asking, did you know that Filmhouse is run by a charity? Fast on the votes. That's great. Nearly. Yep. Okay, here we go. So 89% of people that have joined us this afternoon already know that Filmhouse is a charity, which is terrific, and just 11% know. So still some work for us to do there. Right, Richard, are you ready? I'm going to hand over to you now to take us through your designs for the building.
Good afternoon, everybody. And what I'm going to do is explain where things are in the building, take you on a movie tour. You may have seen the movie on the Filmhouse's website and elsewhere, but it's, as Ken said, this is a work in progress, so it's moved on a little bit. But before I say that, I mean, I can just reiterate what Ken said, but that we are, in a way, following on Edinburgh's great tradition of making very significant public buildings. One might say, actually, more public buildings than a city of the size of Edinburgh might normally warrant. And we've got a terrific collection already: the National Gallery, the Royal Scottish Academy, the museum, the Usher Hall, the Portrait Gallery, and then more recently the Modern Art Gallery, and then the Conference Centre, what have you. These are all significant public buildings. So we see this as another step in the continuity of history of creating a very significant public building. And as Ken was saying, you know, all the other arts have their temples, have their places to go, and film is sitting hiding behind a Georgian facade. So we want to bring this quintessentially 20th century cultural activity into the limelight and give it its own place, which is commensurate, for example, with music across the road with the Usher Hall. And I think that's overdue, and that's what we're trying to do. So it's a very ambitious project in many ways. It's not just simply taking the Filmhouse and making it bigger. It's a different idea about what the building might be about and how significant it might be, both for Edinburgh, for Scotland, and for Europe, actually. So the drawing in front of you is a long section. Obviously, there are two bits to this building, the bit underground and the bit above ground. And the bit underground goes deep into the drawing, and the one bit you can't see in that drawing, ironically, is the 6 auditoria. But I'll take you from bottom to top. So the bottom is simply kitchen and stores, not a public floor at all. And then the next floor is the concourse from where you get into the 6 auditorium, where you sort of queue, or maybe there's conferences and things like that. The floor above that is the main cafe bar for the Filmhouse, and that's connected via a staircase immediately to the front door above. And that's obviously at ground level, where there's another cafe and box office and what have you. And above that, there's a mezzanine cafe. So there's a 3-story high space full of people hopefully enjoying themselves and as the social heart of the building. Above that is an interesting idea, which is the festival center, which is a special place for obviously film festival events, but also other prestigious sort of events. And as you'll see in the movie, it has a very significant window from which you can see the Usher Hall and the castle, and will itself be, I hope, a memorable room. Above that are 2 floors of offices, one for the Filmhouse and the film festival, and the other one for production companies, educational offices, and offices for the occasional festivals that come and go in the Filmhouse. And then the penultimate floor is a rather spectacular restaurant and terrace. And the final floor is an open bar, open to the sky, but it has a retractable roof. So if it starts raining, you can pull that over. But otherwise, it's really seen as a balcony from which you can have a drink. And also you can watch film on an evening like such as this evening, for example. It would be rather nice to watch film and look at that at the twinkling lights of Edinburgh. So what we're going to do now is go to the movie, and I'll just give you a sort of running commentary as we fly through the building. So here we are coming in with the castle on our left, and we're approaching the building from Cambridge Street, and you can see it sits at the end of Cambridge Street, so it's quite prominent in that sense, in the way that often Edinburgh buildings do sit at the end of their axes. Here it sits, you can see, right opposite the Usher Hall, and it's very significant that we're deliberately placing it on the axis of the Usher Hall, which puts it slightly asymmetrical within the square, which obviously works for the entrance to the Sheraton Hotel. So there's a real conversation between the 2 buildings. In the main floor, immediately you come in, you can see up and down and across. So there's a servery, the box office over there, places to sit, information, all that kind of thing. And as you go upstairs, you get to an upper cafe looking down on the space like this. So we hope that this will be a very animated place because people like to hang out in the Filmhouse, discuss film, or just meet friends there and what have you. And then there's a balcony over the front door. And again, you can see the very deliberate relationship with the Usher Hall across the road. Coming back into the front door again, there are 2 side doors, incidentally, to either side. And you go straight down into the lower level, which is obviously the bar and the main cafe. And that extends out, but then there's a slot of light and space between you and the auditorium. We've just put some nominal names of Scottish cinema heroes there that each auditorium might be named after. But there's light coming down there, and when you look up, you are connected to the outside. So you don't have the sensation of being in a basement, which I think is very important. But you also see the comings and goings to the auditorium. So there is a seamlessness, I think, from coming in through the front door to going to see the film. You can follow the path quite easily. And this is the concourse at the level at which you go into the auditorium, and it also works as a queuing area or as a conference center. And this is a large educational space, which can be divided into 2. Education, of course, being a very important part of the Filmhouse program. And now we're going to go back from the concourse area into the biggest of our auditoria, which is about 300 seats. There's 6 of them, all different sizes and shapes, as you would imagine, and I hope different interiors as well. And then here we're going into that auditoria. As you can see, you come in at the upper level and go down or up. And the seating, of course, is a complete transformation from the existing Filmhouse, a lot more legroom and a lot more elbow room. So we're going out to the side and down the side on the south side. And here you can see, looking right across the cafe, right across the building, to show you how transparent the building is from one side to the other. The square itself, of course, is completely re-landscaped because of the auditorium underneath it, including a new setting for the Sheraton Hotel, incorporating a ramp and an upper terrace from which you can look down on the rest of the square and the view. Now we're going to go up to the festival center immediately above the foyer, and this is, as I said, a rather spectacular view out to the Usher Hall and to the castle. and you'll be able to look at this view until the film is due to start and the screen comes down. And so you move from Edinburgh to wherever you're going in the film, and at the end you go back again, which is quite an interesting concept. We're going to go into the foyer to that space now, which is here with its own bar and a view out in both directions, but also a foyer that can be cut off from the circulation, so it can also act as a meeting room, typically in the film festival. We're coming back into the auditorium, and now we discover the seats have been packed away, and we've got a flat floor space for dinners or whatever you want to do in there, again with this rather spectacular view. So we think that's a room that will be very popular both for Filmhouse events and maybe for outsiders too. Now we're going up to the 2 floors of offices, as I said, one for the Filmhouse and Film Festival and one for everybody else. And there's a rather spectacular boardroom, and there are cellular offices around the side and general office in the middle. We're going to skip the next floor of offices, which is the same, and then we're going to go to the restaurant. There are rooftop restaurants in Edinburgh. This is probably going to be the most spectacular one because it gets a 180-degree view. If you look to the north, you see the new town and the further forth and what have you. If you look to the east, obviously you see the castle and the beginning of the old town. And if you look to the south, you'll see the Victorian city of Edinburgh. So it's a pretty spectacular view, both from inside the restaurant and here as we are on the terrace. And the terrace itself comes out to a sort of prow, like a boat at the front, right opposite the usher hall and the castle, which presumably will be the most popular outside table to have. And then you pop up a rather exciting spiral staircase. And above you on the very top is the rooftop bar. You might start with a drink in the bar and go down for dinner. And that bar, as I mentioned, on summer evenings can turn into a cinema viewing area. And we have canvas roof that can come down to keep the rain off. And I think that will be a very, very memorable idea of watching cinema above the rooftops of Edinburgh. So there's quite a lot of interesting, I think, unusual and new ideas in this building, as well as the basic function of what you would expect in the Filmhouse. And that's the final view. And you can see there how the whole square has been completely re-landscaped. And of course, the responsibility for the upkeep and also for the programming of activities in the square will be devolved to the Filmhouse themselves. So they'll be able to use that for various outside events that come to their mind. So that's a very quick canter through what is actually quite a busy building.
That's great. Thank you for taking us through that. It's really interesting to feel yourself in that space. So just before we go to Fraser, we're going to ask you another quick question. This one is, do you currently think of the Lothian Road area as Edinburgh's cultural quarter? So both Ken and Richard have talked about its placement in Festival Square and its surrounding cultural buildings, but do you feel that that area already feels like a cultural quarter for the city? Just if votes are still coming in. Okay, let's share those. So this time we've got 36% already feel that it is, and 64% feel that it's not yet identified as Edinburgh's cultural quarter. That's an interesting shift from this morning. Fraser, are you ready to take us through some of the logistics around this proposed project?
Yes, thank you, Susie. And thank you to those attending the presentation today. Montague Evans provide town planning and property advice to CMI Filmhouse and have been working as part of a broader team of consultants as we work to develop the proposals with a view to submitting a planning application to the City of Edinburgh Council towards the end of this summer. I'll explain a little more of the planning context and planning process associated with the proposed development. There have been ongoing discussions with the City of Edinburgh Council and other key stakeholders in relation to the the Filmhouse and its future over a number of years. In recent months, there's been significant engagement in relation to the existing site of the Filmhouse and its opportunities and constraints, and also the potential for a new home for the Filmhouse at Festival Square. The Council ultimately required to determine any forthcoming planning applications in accordance with their development plan, unless material considerations indicate otherwise. The development plan for the site includes the Edinburgh Local Development Plan, an extract of which is shown. Briefly stated, in terms of the development plan, the site is located within the defined city centre. The site is located within the West End Conservation Area and immediately adjacent to the Edinburgh World Heritage Site. Festival Square itself is identified as an area of open space. Staying with the local development plan, the policies of the plan are numerous. Briefly stated though, the development plan does seek to support a variety of uses in the city centre, including entertainment and leisure developments. Policies support comprehensively designed proposals which maximise the potential of a site, and they also encourage a mix of uses appropriate to the location. They ultimately seek to create activity in the city centre. Policies of the plan seek to have new development have regard to its setting. From a planning perspective, some of the key points we've been considering within the team include how the building relates to its surroundings, including in relation to the World Heritage Site, how the building sits in Festival Square and how it can help activate the square, and how we can create a sustainable building. The proposals represent a unique opportunity and an exciting opportunity for the city. In terms of the planning process so far, we originally presented the proposals before you today to Edinburgh's Urban Design Panel at the end of January. The proposed development is of a size and a scale that is considered to be a major application proposal in the context of the relevant regulations. Accordingly, and in advance of the submission of a formal planning application, a proposal of application notice was submitted to the Council at the beginning of March. The submission of the proposal of application notice included a consultation strategy detailing the nature of the consultation steps to be undertaken before the application is formally submitted as part of this pre-application process. At this stage, comments are to the Filmhouse team as prospective applicants. Comments are made to the team at this stage and will inform the forthcoming application submission. A report of pre-application consultation will accompany the planning application and will detail the nature of the comments received during this period. The report will detail the project's team's responses to the various issues raised, and there will ultimately be an opportunity to make comments direct to the City of Edinburgh Council as planning authority. Details of the consultation strategy were widely circulated and have appeared across social media platforms and in the press both locally and nationally. As we've heard, and in light of lockdown, Scottish Government advice has been to move to online engagement, which has culminated in various sessions, including today's online forum. Sticking with the planning process, pre-application discussions with City of Edinburgh Council and relevant stakeholders continue. Given the nature of the site and the surrounds, being within the conservation area and adjacent to the World Heritage Site, any application will be supported by a suite of information, including an environmental impact assessment. In addition to the environmental impact assessment report, relevant assessments will be submitted with the planning applications, which will include those relating to planning, design and access, heritage, and also sustainability. Just to summarise on timescales and going forward, the public consultation period is live until the 12th of July. The intention is to bring forward an application for detailed planning permission by late summer, around about August this year. The application is a major development, and that means there is a minimum statutory 4-month determination period within which the Council will determine the proposals. The application will likely be presented to a future meeting of the City Council's Development Management Subcommittee. Thereafter, and hopefully with a positive recommendation, we would like to begin the fundraising process. It is envisaged that completion of the project is likely to take up to 5 years. Just to conclude, all comments received at this stage are to the Filmhouse project team and are not representations to the City of Edinburgh Council. An opportunity to make representations to the Council will exist when a formal application is made. Thank you for your time, and we look forward to discussing the proposals with you and continuing to engage with stakeholders and going forward.
That's great. Thank you, Fraser. I think it's time to crack on with some of the questions we've had in. So people have been quite perky on the Q&A function, and we'll come to those. But there's one both in advance and another one that we've received just now that both focus around the cafe. So let's start with that, I think. I'm going to slightly amalgamate two of them here. So the details on the future of Filmhouse website notes that the capacity of the cafe bar will be slightly increased. However, the overall footfall within the building will be doubled. Elsewhere, there's a comment that the ambience of the cafe will be retained as a relaxing and peaceful environment. I'm wondering how these apparently conflicting facts can be resolved, particularly with some of the cafe tables at higher levels arranged near the stairwells. And when you answer that, I think it's probably for you, Ken, when you answer that, it'd be quite good. We've had another question that is seeking some assurance around the retention of the inclusive atmosphere and affordability of the cafe bar.
That's a lot of questions in a question, but thank you very much, combining all of those. Obviously what folk are doing, I do, is compare what the existing is and what the future might look like. The existing cafe bar is hugely popular. It's got a really good ambience. People like coming in. It's slightly removed from the main road, and therefore it's not quite in your face like some other venues might be. And what we're trying to achieve with the cafe bar within the new building is that it has that slightly one step removed, that we can recreate the ambience that makes it comfortable and relaxed and crucially safe. So many people say they like coming to the Filmhouse Cafe Bar because they feel safe coming, and we wouldn't want to lose that at all. So our commitment is to try and achieve that. But the challenge with the existing cafe bar is that it's way more than a cafe bar. It's a bit like saying Filmhouse is more than a cinema. It's trying to do too many things in the one space. So yes, it's a cafe bar, but it's also a crush bar. When folk are coming to see films, it's where they queue up and wait before they go into the cinemas, because there is nowhere else beyond, if you're going into cinema one, up the staircases. So people hang around in the cafe bar, and it's that crush bar. It's also trying to offer the best range of food that you can imagine in a really confined space. So you've got everything from the sandwiches and the baked potatoes and the soup, through to the chickpea curries and the chilies and the nachos, but right through to an amazing array of special dishes that change through the year. So in effect, you've got restaurant level food, you've got really nice sort of gastro food, and you've got cafe bar food, all in the same space. What we're trying to do with the new building is separate out some of those different functions. So the cafe bar itself will be a cafe bar. It's the place that you'll be able to go, have a cup of coffee, chat with your friends, see other folk. Really nice, one step remove, as far as humanly possible, retaining that sense of safety. The crush bar is actually downstairs, so it's a further floor down. What we don't have at the moment is a circulation space, of concourse for folk waiting to go in or coming out of the cinemas. On level -2 in the new building, that provides that space, and there is a servery at that level, so we can potentially be serving drinks and snacks for folk going into the cinemas before they go in, as opposed to folk currently have to get the drink from the cafe bar counter. And then at the upper level, at the restaurant level, you've got a dedicated restaurant. And so rather than folk going, how do we want actually to have a nice meal in relative peace compared to the absolute hubbub that you get at peak times in the cafe bar, there's a dedicated restaurant space. So rather than trying to cram 3 things into one, what we're actually doing is spreading them out over 3 floors. And it also, the thing that we don't have is anywhere outside. We've got 4 tables outside the Filmhouse building, which, because of the points they're on way, it's quite drafty tables. And so with this, we will have the opportunity to also have tables and chairs outside as well. So yes, there's going to be a huge increase in the number of people, hopefully, coming in. We're looking at double the number of folk coming into the cinemas each year. But actually, we've got treble the amount of eating and drinking space just on the plans as you see them in front of you. So we're confident that the reason that folk come will still be there. But then the final bit was around inclusion and affordability. The cafe bar is an awkward place to get in and out of, even for relatively able-bodied people. The spaces here will all be fully accessible. So that bit of inclusion, but the inclusion part of being welcoming and having different price points as well, so that folk can get the cafe bar food at cafe bar price. And again, part of the challenge we have at the moment is because we're cramming everything in, there's a sort of quite a narrow gap between if you're getting a baked potato through to a special, you're going, actually, how do we make it more sensible at the different levels and more affordable or price appropriate at the different levels as well?
Thanks, Ken. I think that's touched on all the points in that question. Thank you. Let's go to one of our live ones. So here we are. This being a highly ambitious project that will take a long time to complete, has the level of noise and disruption to Lothian Road been considered? Who would like to take that?
Yeah, I'll take that. I mean, nobody likes having a building site either next door to them, and that is an issue. And the building will take probably about 2 years from beginning to end, roughly. We do have an issue actually, because we're digging up the entire square, and obviously the most important thing is to make sure that the people who have their front doors onto the square can still access those front doors and all that kind of stuff. But if you dig up the entire square, then you have to have somewhere to put your site huts and various other things. So there's bound to be at least one, possibly two lanes of Lothian Road that will be closed for a considerable period of time. There's no getting away from that. That happens in the city. I noticed, I mean, obviously at the moment in lockdown, it's not a very fair comparison, but I've noticed my route to work as I walk to work, as I used to do, the North Bridge, for example, has had 2 lanes of traffic, equivalent busy artery. These things happen from time to time, and there's no getting away from it.
Great, thanks, Richard. Ken, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, no, it was just we're in some ways just following on Richard's point that we're fully aware that this will be disruptive. I suppose the timing is that we're looking, as Fraser said, potentially starting construction work probably in 3 years' time. So there's a bit of time to get plans right as well. But it was also just briefly putting it in context is that the City Council themselves have developed their city centre transformation strategy, and part of that is actually narrowing Lothian Road to traffic and making Lothian Road a much more pedestrian-friendly environment. So in the ideal world, and we've commenced the conversation with the City Council about this, is that as we're doing our work, if they're then intending doing their work in parallel, it might then mean that we actually, you get 2 bits of disruptive work being done at the same time. It would be lovely to think that's possible, but their commitment is to how they can make Lothian Road more friendly, and that goes back to that notion of a dislocated cultural quarter, because Lothian Road is this massive road going through the middle of it, and it's therefore not possible to get backwards and forwards. And what we were proposing anyway before the city centre transformation strategy was at the very least having a raised pedestrian crossing linking the square so that we're aligned with the front door of the Usher Hall, and so it then becomes possible potentially just to stop traffic altogether and you can open this whole square up, or even at sort of the bad times it's just buses and taxis and cyclists going upwards and down, but that for the large pedestrian crossing, that means that you've got free flow of people across the greater square.
That's great. And actually, I think you just answered Fiona's question as well. Fiona, if you don't agree, please message in and let me know. But I think that probably covered what you were hoping to find out. We've got one here that's a bit different. So does a festival hub within the building and a larger number of screens mean that once this project goes through, the EIFF will be concentrated in the Filmhouse and there will be less collaboration with other venues? Ken, I think that's one for you.
It is. I suppose it's looking at the other venues that we work with. So we've been working with, over the last few years, in my time, with View, with Cineworld, with Odeon, with Cameo, with Festival Theatre, and with Dominion. We've got every intention of continuing working with other cinemas in the city at festival time. Even with the 6 screens we're proposing, we on average use between 12 and 14 screens during the film festival. So just practically, we need more screens than we will have available. The thing we haven't had, however, is a genuine hub for the festival. So the cafe bar during the film festival becomes Festival HQ, is what we call it. But so much of the other activity is happening in other places. So yes, it becomes a sort of center of the hub of a lot of spokes. And yes, we want more activity to be happening in the building. But that includes all our industry and talent development activity and our education and learning activity, and the potential for that to be year round. At the moment, we have to hire at a lot of expense a lot of other sites and spaces to do all of that activity. So by bringing it into the one space, A, it becomes that more sustainable bit, but B, it creates that sense that underpins so much of what we're trying to do, is create that community of film, where you're bringing the people who want to see films together in the same space, who the people making films, who the same space, the people teaching film and film theory, and the people who are curating film festivals and other film events. And you just put everyone into this big melting pot. And going back to the cafe bar question, that's where the interesting chats happen, because whoever you sit down beside, complete stranger otherwise, will have some kind of connection to film or the screen sector.
Great. Here's another one. This one's around outdoor space. So there was mention of using the outdoor space for events. Is that going to form part of the planning application, or will it be subject to ad hoc future applications? Is that?
I'll start a little bit and then possibly pass over to Fraser in terms of the technicalities. What we want to do, as I said, is use this building as a catalyst for animating, enlivening Festival Square. I currently work, or not this precise second, but normally work 20 yards away from Festival Square, and I go there to make confidential phone calls because it's deserted. It's always quiet. The only times it has been busy in my time is when they had the BBC big screen, which for years was just there, showing its pictures to the Sheraton residents and not very many other people, because they weren't allowed to have it facing onto the street. And when Andy Murray won his gold medal, and then the following year Wimbledon, and Chris Hoy won his gold medal, and then one of the royal weddings, I think, it was busy. And apart from that, it wasn't. And then in between times, Spiegel Tent's been there a couple of times. There's a gin festival. So there activity has happened, but just not very much, and it hasn't stayed, it hasn't come back at all. So what we're looking to do is have responsibility, but not just on our own, but working with our neighbours and other organisations in looking at how we can curate the space in interesting ways. So for example, I mentioned artists and potential for performance. So we've already started conversations with the Art Festival and other arts organisations about how we can curate the space, not just during August time connected to the Art Festival, but year round. How can we make Festival Square a destination for the citizens of Edinburgh, as well as, yes, visitors, but just that it's a space that works for the city. Fraser, I don't know if you've got how things get built in or not into a planning application and planning decision.
Yeah, sure. Just to add to that, Ken, I think the intention with the current proposals is to submit, together with the planning application, our own proposals for the public square to be created in and around the new Filmhouse building, and that will include various different spaces. We've been in discussions with the council about agreeing to how those spaces may ultimately work in going forward, and we guess that that will be the subject of a management plan. There may well be different licensing requirements for different events as they come forward, but certainly with the application that we're proposing to submit, there'll be a good indication as to the nature of the types of spaces that are being created. I think we do anticipate quite a lot of ad hoc events in line with the Filmhouse to probably be developed on the space, but also any larger scale applications will require to be subject of licensing requirements.
Thanks, Fraser and Ken. And thank you everyone for the questions that you're sending in. It's really great to have so many for us to talk through. Richard, I think perhaps this next one might come to you. So the new building does not keep with the neighbouring buildings. Why does it look like Times Square? Yeah.
I take that as a bit of a compliment, actually. I like Times Square. It's a very exciting place to be. Well, first of all, we have, if you like, 4 neighbouring buildings, well, 3 definitely, who are our neighbours, all of them built in the 1980s stroke 90s. I'm not sticking my neck out here, but I think they're not a serious part of Edinburgh's heritage, shall we say. So we don't really want to look like those buildings. We have, of course, the Usher Hall on the other side of the road. And as I've already said, we want to have a very definite connection with these two what will become two very important cultural buildings sitting opposite each other. In fact, the only other one I can think of like that is the National Gallery and the Royal Scottish Academy. But as we know, Playfair got it wrong and didn't put the National Gallery on the axis, so they don't quite face each other. And then the Royal Scottish Academy is the wrong way around. So hopefully we can learn from his mistakes. To come back to the question though, why does it look like it does? Because it's a building built in the 2020s, and you would expect it to have, you'd expect it to tell people architecturally that it was of its own time. It's also dealing with a technology film, which is about animation. And so we want to have things on the outside of the building which are animated so that people know that it is a cinema. So occasionally, there are moments in a city's development, particularly when you're making an object building, a building that's surrounded by space, sitting in a square, where you can take your foot off the brake. We're not in the World Heritage Site. We're not really adjacent to any important buildings. We want to do something which is exciting, which is about the 21st century, I should say, and which is a beacon for the idea that Edinburgh's architectural heritage has both a future and a past. So that's where it's come from.
Terrific. Thank you for that, Richard. We've got quite a few more questions, so I'm going to crack on. Looking at the website, the old Filmhouse building will be rented out, sold or kept. Can CMI offer a guarantee that the building will be kept as a cultural or community space as stated? How will you ensure that it isn't turned into yet another apartment block?
That'll be me. Can't give that guarantee, I'm afraid. What we have said is we will only make our minds up what to do with the existing building once we've gone through the planning process. And this links into where we are at anyway with this project, is that we have been supported by the City Council to explore developing on Festival Square. And they said, they would be prepared to negotiate a deal for access to Festival Square to allow us to build a new building, subject to securing planning permission and subject to raising the funds. We're doing it very sequentially. We're going through this process to see if we can get planning permission. And very crudely, if we can't get planning permission, then we have to go back to quite a big drawing board next spring and go, so what do we do? If we do get planning permission, it's going to take, as Fraser said, probably a further 4 years at least before this new building would actually be developed. And it's at that point that we would start, through that period, that we would start to work out what we do with the existing building. We own the existing building. We are aware that we have a responsibility, because we own it, to ensure that it is maintained. But clearly our priority is how do we develop a space that is actually fit for purpose. We're very happy to enter into conversations with folk who would like the existing building to be used for other purposes, but clearly one of the things we've got to consider is how do we generate enough cash, raise enough cash to develop a new site. So it's crudely not for me to make that kind of commitment. It's not for me to say what the end outcome will be.
Okay, thank you very much. Here's a quick question, Ken, for you again, I think. Does a new Filmhouse mean more jobs will be available?
I hope so, yes. I mean, I think one of the things we were looking at is, it's quite interesting. I've done a number of these presentations over recent months, and obviously we were briefing the staff group before we went live with this on the public consultation. And the question was actually the other way around, which was, are there going to be any job losses? Because if this building is so efficient and effective and easier to run, does that mean you'll need fewer people rather than more? The reality is, it is, even though it will be more efficient to run in some ways, we will be needing people to operate it. And clearly, because of particularly the food and drink aspects to the building, there will be more work opportunities there. It is a bigger building, and just simple things like assisting people through the building will require supervisory staff, ushers and others to guide folk through the space. But I think much more importantly than us, it's what the catalyst, this building will be the catalyst for a broader film and screen sector. You've got the new film studios, which will hopefully be opening in Leith in the near future. You've got Edinburgh absolutely on the front foot in terms of film and screen being a priority, and at a national level through Screen Scotland, film and screen is on a much better footing than it's been probably in decades in terms of political support and financial support. And that means that in terms of the organisations who are committed to not just showing films, but curating festivals, conducting film education, developing film education activity, as well as the making, I think there's going to be a lot more of those people as well. And that this building then becomes the hub for them to develop their practice. So I think, yes, there's probably going to be more jobs through us as an organisation, but probably and hopefully creating more opportunities for other businesses to develop their practice as well.
Thank you, Ken. We've got just under 10 minutes, and at the moment we've got 2 more questions, but more may come in, so we'll keep cracking on. How will I'm not sure if this is for Richard or Ken, so how will the transparent glazed sections on the ground floor and other parts of the building to create the active and welcoming appearance, be maintained in the context of traffic fumes, even in the context of CEC's traffic reduction schemes, and in light of the Lothian Road environment with nightclubs, bars, fast food takeaways, and general detritus of a busy urban environment? How will it be secured from local yobs throwing their half-eaten kebabs at it without requiring daily washing?
Well, I think I'll jump in first. I'm sure Richard's got his own views. We recognise that it's going to have to be cleaned a lot more often than probably we clean the existing Filmhouse windows, and so that's been built into the business plan. It's also recognising that Festival Square as a space is underloved and underused. And one of the key things that we've had a consultation session with Police Scotland, and they were actually very happy that this building was going to be there, because they went, not just because of the building, but the fact that we have life from relatively early in the morning through to relatively late in the evening. And that in itself provides security because you've just got people. The big problem from the police's perspective is where you've got quiet corners. And the good thing about the building is that there aren't any quiet corners of the building. It's out in the open. But secondly, it means that the other quiet corners that would normally exist within Festival Square are going to be much more visible to many more people. So absolutely taking the security aspect seriously. We've, as I say, consulted Police Scotland already. We're looking at what additional measures we might need to take, and things like CCTV and so on, which we currently have, we will continue to have, and monitoring the space. So it's a yes. So the dirtiness part, we will clean the windows. And secondly, absolutely, how do we ensure that not just the building, but the space around the building feels safe? And I think because we exist in that space, that will help tremendously. And that's exactly what Police Scotland said. I don't know if you want to add anything, Richard, or...
Well, I could just say, somebody mentioned traffic fumes, I think. The building is actually further set back from Lothian Road than any of the other buildings on Lothian Road. So that's not likely to be a problem in terms of air quality. And most of its elevations are facing north and south, rather than a very small elevation facing east. So I don't anticipate that being a particular problem. The Filmhouse themselves will be responsible for the maintenance of Festival Square, which is good news, I think, because it's always good to have the people whose front door opens onto a square to actually be responsible for it. And so it's not in their interest for it to be full of, as somebody said, detritus and whatnot from various people the previous evening. I think also it's worth saying that, the interesting thing it seems to be about Lothian Road is it is a complete mixture of people who go there, particularly in the evenings. You do have the nightclub crowd, but you also have 2,500 people coming out of the Usher Hall. You've got people coming out the Lyceum, further up the road it's the King's Theatre and what have you. So there are other people, and then you've got rather rich people going in and out of the Sheraton Hotel. So it's a big mixture of people, and I think the Filmhouse, which will be doubling if not tripling its numbers of people coming into it. Not everybody will go there to see a film, for example. It could become just a social centre as well. I think that's going to very much help, dare I say, raise the tone or civilise the area, and will change the nature of Lothian Road. So I'm quite optimistic about that, actually, in its own way.
Thank you, Richard and Ken. We've got 2 more questions and only 5 minutes, so perhaps some snappy-ish answers. What guarantee can CMI give that this new Filmhouse will not evolve into yet another commercial cinema in order to justify its own running cost and put bums on seats, therefore excluding the independent and worldly films that Filmhouse exists to screen?
It's why we exist. So we're a charity. It's what we do. It's the basis of our charity objects. And if we didn't do it, we wouldn't be delivering against that. So the commitment from an organisation that has been doing it as Filmhouse for 42 years is that's the reason we exist. It's what we do. And just in terms of that absolute passion and commitment, is the reason we want this is to do more. We want to show more films. We want to, from a broader range of filmmakers to a broader range of audiences, make it a much more accessible space. But critically, it's for the people of Edinburgh. And that almost brings it down to, we will only succeed if the people of Edinburgh back us to succeed. So the guarantee is there, we won't be showing increased number of commercial titles because that's not what we do. But in showing a broader range of films from a broader range of countries, a broader range of filmmakers, we need your support in making sure we're able to do that.
Can I add a little piece there, actually? The questioner may be familiar with the building DCA in Dundee, which I designed with my office. And we put the social activity of the building at the heart of that building. And it has been an astonishing success in terms of the cafe and the bar. And it is, as somebody has said, the living room of Dundee, which is a nice concept. But to be come down to brass tacks about it, the bar and the restaurant subsidize the gallery and pay for 6 curatorial staff from the profits from the bar and the restaurant. Now that's quite important, because an awful lot of cultural buildings, the catering struggles to survive, really, and sometimes it even has to be subsidized in the other direction. So I think this building is going to become, Filmhouse already is a social centre, but it's going to become much more of a social centre, and there'll be ways of earning money which will go into the cultural budget of the Filmhouse. So it's much better to have your own, instead of to be reliant on grants and subsidies and what have you, it's much better to have other facilities within your building that can actually make you money, and that can plough into the main activity of the business of what the building's really all about.
Thanks, Richard. Ken, I think this last one's for you, and just a very brief answer. We've just got a couple of minutes left. So, in light of the coronavirus pandemic, do you feel you've been able to receive adequate response for the public consultation? I can see the effort has been made to let the public know this is happening, but there may well be many people that aren't aware it's happening. Do you worry that you haven't managed to get a good idea of what the public feel?
A really good question. We obviously launched the public consultation on the 11th of March. We shut the doors at Filmhouse on the 18th of March, and obviously lockdown officially came in the following week. We've been hugely frustrated, speaking bluntly, that we haven't been able to speak to as many people face to face as we would have wanted to. Having said that, the amount of material that's been available online, we've been promoting it widely. We've had individual conversations with a lot of organisations and interest groups through that period. We've extended the deadline we're hosting these events. I think means that we have done absolutely everything. And just to put it into context, we've had, I think, approaching 600 responses to the survey that's available on the website. It would be great if we got more, but actually 600 is a huge number of comments that people, a huge number of people making comment about what we're planning to do. Clearly, this is the pre-application consultation stage, and therefore this is to us. But as Fraser said earlier, once we submit the final planning application, the full planning application later in the summer, then that's when the conversation in some ways and the comments go directly to the City Council. But we will also be at that point promoting where we have got to and how we will have adapted the design of the building. As Richard said, it's work in progress. So by the time we go live with the full planning application, that's when we'll be able to say, this is how we've listened, this is how we've adapted, and this is the full story behind what we're proposing to do.
Thanks, Ken. In fact, our questioner, Kay, has just got back to say that's fantastic. I'm really pleased to hear that. So thank you for that. And just to share with the panel a little bit of feedback too on YouTube, Corbin Brody has said that he's really appreciating the high level of detail and multiple layers of local context in this presentation. So thank you to you all. And that's us for this evening. We don't have time for any more questions, or this afternoon, not quite this evening yet. Thank you to Ken, Richard and Fraser for all the detail and all the answers that you've given to everyone, and to everyone for asking the questions. We really appreciate your engagement with this. The consultation, as we've said, is still open. It's open until the 12th of July. So please, there's still time to fill in those forms. You can access the survey through the Filmhouse website. And if there are people that you think may have not engaged with this yet and you think should or might be interested in doing so, you've got our contact details. And again, you can point them in the direction of the survey and the website, and we would love to hear from them too. So this is the fourth and final public online consultation that we've done. Thank you very much to everyone that's taken part in them. Have a good evening. Thanks. Bye-bye.